the Israeli military opened fire on the crowd because they felt threatened. We don't know what that means.
For the Israeli government to complain about the media reporting of this just seems to me absolutely unacceptable when it is the Israeli government that is not allowing independent journalists to go in there. None of that should get away from the bigger picture that you zoom out and look at, which is of a population that has been starved of aid for the past 3 months. And that seems to me reprehensible for a country, Israel, that venerates its democratic principles and ideas of a free press and all the rest of it.
Mr. Speaker, I'm grateful to her for raising this, and she's absolutely right to describe this as dark days. And Israel's recent action is appalling and, in my view, counterproductive and intolerable. And we have strongly opposed the expansion of military operations and settler violence and the blocking of humanitarian aid. Mr. Speaker, you will have seen we've suspended the FTA talks and sanctioned extremists supporting violence in the West Bank. We will keep looking at further action along with our allies, including sanctions. But let me be absolutely clear. We need to get back to a ceasefire. We need the hostages who've been held for a very long time to be released. And we desperately need more aid at speed and at volume into Gaza because it's an appalling and intolerable situation.
It is 2 weeks since Keir Starmer first stood in front of us talking about the appalling, intolerable situation in Gaza. It has got infinitely worse in recent days. 3 incidents in 3 days where Palestinians, Gazans, have been shot at point-blank range whilst they've been queuing for food amongst a starving population.
And if the pictures of tens of thousands of children looking emaciated aren't enough to get Israel to change its mind and open the border crossings, what will? Welcome to the News Agents. It's John.
It's Emily. And the first thing that I think we should say when we're approaching the story of what's happening on the ground in Gaza is that we're not there. Nobody's there. None of the Western journalists are there. We are dependent on extraordinarily brave and extraordinarily talented local Palestinian journalists to tell us the stories of what's happening there. But it is almost impossible to get verification. So when we give you numbers, some of them might change. When we tell you what we're hearing, bear in mind that we haven't got the first-hand experience to know what we are hearing is always true. But at the moment, the picture that is emerging is of tens of thousands of children who are facing starvation. And when they are going to queue for food, they face the potential that they will be fired on by the Israeli military. This happened yesterday when at least 27 people were killed, many more were injured. They were literally queuing up for food in Rafah in southern Gaza. That's according to the Hamas-run health ministry.
Emily, you're absolutely right. There's going to be claim and counterclaim over how many people were killed, the circumstances in which those shots were fired, whether there was a risk, whether there wasn't a risk. None of that should get away from the bigger picture that you zoom out and look at, which is of a population that has been starved, using the word literally, of aid for the past 3 months, where aid has dropped to a trickle that under the new system, and there are people who are starving. That is the bigger picture. Of that there can be no doubt. And the Israeli government and Hamas spokespeople can fight about, well, we didn't shoot the first shot, you shot, whatever. It doesn't detract from the fact that there are large numbers of people, hundreds of thousands, possibly 2 million people, who haven't been fed and aren't getting food, and the crops that were once, plentiful, the wheat, the olives, are fallow now in Gaza as a result of the destruction that has taken place. And Gaza is entirely dependent now on something like 600 food trucks getting in a day to support the population, and that ain't happening.
So just to put this in context, what has happened, what has changed, is that instead of aid relief workers being allowed in to feed the population of Gaza, as we saw during the first 2 years of the bombing, Israel has now taken control. Israel believes that when it's been sending in aid to Gaza, it has all been diverted and taken by terrorists, by Hamas, who have then sold it on or taken it off and not passed it on to the people of Gaza. That is what Israel is saying has led them to a change in the rules. And it is such a fundamental change, which means essentially that it is Israeli military with the joint forces of some US-backed businesses who are now running these food stations, aid stations. There are only 4 of them. 3 are in the south. So if you're living in the north of Gaza, and if you are in any way immobile or disabled or have trouble coming to find food, then that is going to be infinitely worse to make that trip through a dangerous country many, many more miles. There are reports that the aid gets in to these centres at around 5 in the morning. So people are walking through the night, many with their children, to try and be at the front of the queue. And yesterday we heard from an Israeli government spokesman that the Israeli military opened fire on the crowd because they felt threatened. We don't know what that means. We don't know what the crowd were doing, and we don't know why the Israeli military felt threatened. But it resulted, as I say, in nearly 30 people dead. But as a result of that, the Israeli military said the incident is under investigation. The UN has called for it to be investigated. But it is, as I say, the 3rd time this has happened in pretty much as many days since the new scheme began. So something is not working. And if people are still prepared to go to these centres, to line up and queue for food, to beg for food for their families, at the risk of getting shot at by the Israeli military, then something is going really, really wrong with whatever scheme is in place.
I think there's one point that needs amplifying, and you spoke about it a moment ago. There was an Israeli government spokesman I heard on the radio, I think this morning or yesterday, and accusing the interviewer of just spouting Hamas propaganda. That is not what we do. But we are starved of certain levels of information, in the sense that, well, if we can't have reporters on the ground there finding out for yourself, you've got very limited ways of accessing information. You can't send your film crew or your team of journalists to go to an area and see what actually happened and try to piece together the story by talking to eyewitnesses. You just don't have that capability. And so, for the Israeli government to complain about the media reporting of this just seems to me absolutely unacceptable, when it is the Israeli government that is not allowing independent journalists to go in there, whether from Reuters, whether from AP, whether from the BBC, us, ITV, whoever. None of them are allowed in. There are no Western journalists, Western news agencies allowed to operate in Gaza. And that seems to me reprehensible for a country, Israel, that venerates its democratic principles and ideas of a free press and all the rest of it.
Well, we're going to speak now to somebody who does know Gaza well, who has been in and out since the war began, and she's the spokeswoman in Amman for UNICEF. It's Tess Ingram.
And Tess, how is this new system operating, and is it working?
So we are not a part of that system, so I can't tell you exactly how it operates, but I can tell you that it has been attempting to distribute food aid to people in Gaza for the last few days. Reportedly, it stopped operating today to try and iron out some of the challenges that it has faced. But the United Nations has been very clear about our involvement in this initiative, and it is that we don't believe that it meets the humanitarian principles necessary for proper, safe and dignified aid delivery, and so we are not a part of that. But we have been, of course, warning around some of those risks and why we don't believe it meets up to those principles that we apply in the Gaza Strip and throughout all of the countries in the world where we operate.
So just spell out what the shortcomings are with the new system.
There's technical issues, and there are also issues with it on a principled level. Humanitarian principles really is just jargon for making sure that we deliver aid to the people where they need it in a safe and dignified way. For example, during the ceasefire, we had about 400 distribution points across Gaza so that people could easily access the aid that we were able to provide. This new plan proposes having a handful, 5 or 6 different distribution points, and most of them, in fact, all of them at the moment, are in the south of Gaza. And our concern with that is that it forces vulnerable people to move. It forcibly displaces people to try and get the aid that they need to survive. And there's a risk that that displacement could be entrenched. people must be allowed to move freely, and they've got to be able to return to their homes. Even if their homes are rubble, they've got to have that choice. And that's something that we're concerned about. We're also concerned about the fact that there's security at the perimeters of these sites. We've seen reports of people killed and injured in recent days trying to get food. And that has to be unacceptable to the world, that when somebody is seeking aid, they should not be put at risk. They should not be put at risk from that travel through, the ongoing intensity of the bombardments, but particularly not from a secure militarized aid distribution side. The aid that's being distributed as well, we really don't think that it meets children's needs for growth and development. It's calorie controlled, and it's not sufficient for a family to survive after we're now in the 20th month of a war. So there's a number of reasons why we don't believe that this is the best approach, and we do continue to insist that the United Nations has a proven plan, and we have the aid sitting outside the Gaza Strip. This is not an aid issue. This is an access issue. We've just got to be allowed to provide that aid in line with our principles, which we've proven we can do when we're enabled.
Tess, we know that journalists aren't allowed in. Very few, even aid workers, are allowed in. So the sense that we're getting on the ground is literally from the pictures that are allowed out. But you have colleagues on the ground in Gaza now. Just spell out to us what they are seeing, because we know that at least 27 people were killed, many, many more injured while they were queuing for aid over the last couple of days. It's the third incident of its kind. And we understand, and I know this is now being investigated by the Israeli military, that the military opened fire on those queuing because they, the military, felt threatened. I mean, spell out for us, if you can, what your colleagues are witnessing right now.
We're not at those distribution sites, but we are talking to people in the Gaza Strip. We've got team based in Mawassi, which is not too far from the area where that site is. And they're talking to people about how humiliating they feel this system is, how dangerous they feel it is, how frightened they are about their inability to get aid and get it safely. We're also hearing reports from medical teams about the people who have been treated with wounds, including wounds from live ammunition, including children. And these are all really concerning reports. And I think it's important to note that they come on top of the ongoing killing and injuring of children from the bombardments. Reportedly, in the last 24 hours alone, 100 people have been killed in the Gaza Strip. So yes, we have the challenges and issues at this distribution site run by the so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, but we also have the ongoing bombardments, which are continuing to displace people, to kill them, to injure them, to hit civilian infrastructure. And I think that's important for us to focus on as well.
And if you pause aid, as they are doing now, for 24 hours, they say, to get communication and clarity, what happens? I mean, give us a sense of what that means.
It means that families endure even greater suffering. Now, let's be clear. The aid that's been able to be distributed from the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation is limited. We need to get 600 trucks of aid into the Gaza Strip every day to meet people's needs. This plan has talked about 60 trucks. That's a tenth of what is needed. So then pausing for a day, yes, that will increase people's suffering because they will not have access to aid. But more importantly, I think the question here is making sure that aid comes in beyond that. That alone is not enough. We need the United Nations to be allowed to bring the trucks that we have in just outside. UNICEF has 1,000 trucks worth of life-saving supplies for children, medicine, nutrition supplies, you name it, ready to come in. That should be allowed to come in. That is what the people of Gaza need. That's the answer to this solution. And it's a very simple one. It's open the gates.
The reasoning that some of the Israeli cabinet are giving as to why they've not permitted that aid to go in is that they say that Hamas is taking the aid that's coming. Have you seen any evidence of that? Have you seen evidence that supplies are just going directly to terrorists rather than to the people of Gaza?
No. I've been to the Gaza Strip 3 times since October 2023. I have been part of aid distributions. I have never seen that firsthand, and I wish that you and the other international members of the press could be allowed into the Gaza Strip to see that firsthand as well.
So that's a lie. I mean, you think it's a lie. You would call that out as a lie.
I would say that we haven't been given any evidence of that. Yes, there's looting. And I think that that looting that we see is desperate civilians. And it's a simple economic question. If you restrict aid, if you drip it in for 20 months and then cut it off entirely for almost 3 months, of course tensions are going to build. Of course, people are going to try and get what they can to survive, to feed their children, to get a bit of water for their elderly mother to drink. I think we can all understand that. But I have not seen any evidence of Hamas looting when I have been in Gaza.
Do you think there is an end game here in terms of what this is meant to achieve for Israel?
We have warned of the risks of a plan that does not meet humanitarian principles, and those risks being entrenching forced displacement, militarizing aid, using it as bait to force people to these sites. We've warned about that. We've been very clear that there are risks associated with that plan.
Could it work, their system, or is it doomed to fail?
The plan that we have been presented with, we don't believe it meets our humanitarian principles, and that is why we haven't engaged with it to date. We're not crossing our arms and saying, we're not going to work with you. That's not what's happening here. We're saying this plan does not meet our principles, these principles that we apply all over the world. And so we can't work within those boundaries. Could this plan work? It could work if it was changed. It's got to be something that meets these humanitarian principles. That's really, really important.
And the level of hunger, the level of need, how would you characterise it?
It's incomprehensible to me that we are starving children. Children are live streaming themselves on the internet, appealing for their lives. And yet the blockade really does continue because the amount of aid that has come in is so limited. We are at a critical risk of a famine. A panel of international experts have told us that we are now within that period. A famine could be happening in that period now. We're seeing children with malnutrition. We're seeing children die from malnutrition. And that panel of experts has projected that as many as 70,000 kids could need treatment for malnutrition between now and March next year. And where's the food? It's a few kilometres away. Where are the nutrition treatments that will save these malnourished children's lives? They're in trucks just outside. So that's the situation that we're dealing with. And I think if that is not a moment for moral clarity and action for the international community, then I don't know what is.
And when you make this point directly to the Israeli government, when you petition those who could change their minds, what responses are you getting?
I think, for 20 months, really, we've been making the same pleas to cease fighting, to protect civilians and civilian infrastructure, to provide them with the basics that they need to survive, all of which is required under international humanitarian law. And we've seen no change. So I think the response is clear. The response is that aid continues to be restricted, if not fully prevented from entering. International humanitarians continue to remain at risk and often denied access to places where we need to go. Civilians continue to be killed. Hospitals continue to be hit. It's unending. And I think that our appeals now continue to be to the parties to the conflict, but also to the international community.
Why? What do you think? I mean, what would you... Let's take the UK, for example. You've seen Keir Starmer talk about an appalling situation and an incomprehensible situation, and he has paused free trade agreements. What would you actually like to see the international community do now?
I think they have to pull every lever of influence that they have at this moment in time.
Which is what?
There's a Security Council vote today. That's a good start. We need member states to use whatever political and economic influence that they have to continue to advocate and press for a ceasefire, to continue to put pressure on the parties to the conflict to uphold their responsibilities under international humanitarian law, including ending the blockade and allowing aid to flow in a safe and dignified manner.
Tess Ingram, thank you very much. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And in a moment, Lewis, who has been to Blackpool and come back from Blackpool On reform and the growth and the surge and everything else that is happening with the Reform Party.
Number 10, get him out.
The newsagents are back in Blackpool because we've heard there's a new pub in town. Or rather, an old pub with a new look, a new party. The Talbot, Britain's first reform party, social club. Here goes nothing.
Grade 2 for 6th grade.
Nick, this was what we're standing in right now. This is a Conservative club until...
It was till August 09
Oh, right, okay.
when I took over it.
Yeah. And now it is Britain's first reform club.
It is, yes. Well, I'm a reform member myself, and I joined, and they sent me an email, basically, to help distribute leaflets. So I just emailed them back saying, unfortunately, I got a pub, but I've got a massive function room, so if they ever want to use it for any of their meetings, they're quite welcome to do so. I phoned my business partner up, Pete, and told him that I joined Reform at the beginning of this year. And he said, I've been a member for a year and a half. So we just decided that, we had a meeting here and then we looked at each other, we just decided, let's change the name to Reform Club, give it some support, believe in the policies.
How do you feel that this is a reform club now?
I think it's great.
Do you?
Yes,
Why?
I do. Because the way things are going in the past, I mean, I've been a Labour man because I'm from Wigan originally. I'm 60 years old. I've always voted Labour all my life. I don't like getting too much into politics because it's politics. You know what it's like, and religion.
I do. I know.
But yes, the way the reforms go, if they can, I think they deserve a chance.
Did you vote Labour at the election?
Oh,
The last election?
The last election, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
You voted Labour for Starmer?
Yes.
And how do you think Starmer's done?
Shocking.
My name is Margaret Murphy, originally from Dublin. I've been in Blackpool now for 31 years.
31 years, long time.
I've been a member of this club for 30.
What do you think of Starmer?
Well, I've been Labour all my life. And at the moment, I don't want to even see anyone and one of them. Because he's U-turned on everything.
Do you think he cares?
No.
You don't think he cares?
No.
I think we're getting shit on.
If I can put it this way, who's shitting on you?
Well, the government, aren't they?
The government.
They took everything away from you.
Yeah, it's a bit of a mess.
A mess? In what way?
I just don't think that the politicians are doing what they're saying they're doing.
In what way?
Well, they've lost Middle England. We just get misdirection, spin, and they're not doing what they said in their manifesto. So that's why in the general election I voted Reform, and we've yet to vote in Blackpool, which is a unitary government or government council. But I was well impressed with the way the by-elections went.
Do you think people will turn to Reform here?
I think so.
You do think so? Why?
Because it looks like they genuinely care about what's going on.
You said you've been Labour, you always voted Labour. Is there anything Starmer could do to recover your support?
No, I
Nothing?
don't think so. No.
And what was it that he did? I'm just trying to pinpoint. What was it that he did that lost you?
It was the winter fuel allowance for a start. The people who are living in this country, who have lived and worked in this country, have lost all hope with the government.
Do you think Farage would be a good Prime Minister?
Currently, yes, if he sticks to what he's saying he's going to do, yeah.
What is it? Is it about their policies? Is it about their attitude? Is it about what is it about their politics that you find appealing? Is it Farage?
I think it's just generally at the moment, it's just a breath of fresh air and common sense.
But you're the owner of Britain's first reform club, and you actually say, as a result, if you'd known now what you'd known about Brexit, you'd have voted Remain.
I probably would have done, yeah, but I didn't know. It's too late now, isn't it? So I agree with the rest of the population that voted for Brexit, so I've got to carry on with it, haven't I?
I suppose Some people would blame Farage for misleading you and others about Brexit. Then.
Well, it wasn't just for Farage, was it? There was a certain Conservative leader that was all for it as well. And I'm all for people coming to this country legally. Get a visa. If I want to go to Spain, which I will be doing because that's where I want to retire to, I've got to get a visa. I have 28,000 euros in the bank for myself.
Pre-Brexit, you'd have just been able to move there.
Well, yeah. And believe it or not, they didn't tell the truth about that. If they explained everything about Brexit, like, oh, well, you won't be able to travel as many times as you want to Spain, freedom of movement, I would have probably voted not to leave it.
You would?
Yeah.
But that was Farage's big idea.
Well, everyone changes their mind.
There's millions going out of this country to France for them to stop the immigrants. And they once they put their foot in the water, the police will do nothing.
These people who work for this company and paid the tax and insurance all their life. So why take it off these and give it to the immigration people who shouldn't be having it? They shouldn't be entitled to that money. They've not paid nothing into the monetary system. So as far as I'm concerned, I paid all my life tax and national insurance. They haven't. If you paid it, you deserve it. If you don't pay it, you try to go to Spain or Australia or anywhere like that, you've got no one whatsoever. They will not stand for it. And we should be the same. Let's keep Britain British.
We're going upstairs. What's up here?
A little function room.
Oh. Did you get any weirdos by, renting out the room?
Well, according to some of the papers, I've had some weirdos here. The punks.
The punks. Oh, this was the Nazi stuff.
Yeah, supposedly so.
Because someone suggested that you'd let it out to Nazis.
No, someone rang me up, and it was the first time with the punks, and
they were punks, not Nazis.
No, the punks. And someone approached me, and she said, "Can I use your room upstairs?" So I've gone, "Yeah, okay. What's it for?" It's for the punks. We had the first year, and it was absolutely chocker. No trouble. No Nazi flags or anything like that at all. Then after the second time, that's when I started to hear things about Nazi flags and all that. Just quite a few people that have just recently stirred it all up again. But it's not like that. I mean, if I knew that was what they were like. I mean, I've had another guy come do it because the girl quit, and I had another organiser, and I remember someone jumping up on stage and giving it the Nazi thing, and he just went over and lamped him and got him out.
Have the swingers ever come round?
No, I don't do anything like that. No, like Sex and Unity in here.
Oh, right, okay,
it's
right.
Licence.
Oh, yeah, okay, well.
40, 60, 60, 2 and 4, 21.
Okay then, Lewis, what do you think about playing the bingo?
7 and 6,
I'm doing it, as you know, for Coral, because Coral's been taken unwell, so I'm playing on Coral's.
Hopefully, fingers crossed, that is okay. And Lewis wins for that, playing his bingo here at the Talbot Reform pub.
2 and 7, 27. 4 and 9.
Yeah. What? Whoa, stop everything.
We've got 2. We've got 3.
What? No, that can't be right.
We've got the captain, we've got Lewis, and we've got Maggie.
This is for Coral. This is what we call a winning hand.
16.
You want to get Lewis from the news agents to call your next bingo. How's that, dear?
This is so good. This is so good. With all the money, you wouldn't get Emily Maitlis doing this, would you?
Can I have a round of applause, please?
Thank you. It's an honour to be with you, ladies and gentlemen, tonight. An absolute honour. So your first number, this one here. Here we go. 7-0, line 70. 1 and 8, 18. 8 and 7, John Sopel's age, 87. You know him, dear. 1 and 6, Sweet 16. All the 7s, 77. 1 and 9, the number of listeners to the Rest is Politics podcast, 19. Oh, you do know that one. 6-0, line 60. Ladies and gentlemen, that was an honour. Thank you very much.
Can I have a massive applause for Lewis from the news agents, folks?
So obviously the conceit for this piece has been we've come to this reform club because the owner, who's, as you can tell, nice man, has basically decided to make it a reform club. But the truth is that the reform bit is kind of completely incidental. As you can probably tell, most people in there are not that interested in party politics, and then pretty unbothered about it being a reform club one way or the other. They come because it's part of the community and it's got, cheap drinks and pool and bingo, and it's part of their life. And the thing that I think is just so both fascinating and disturbing about everything that everyone was saying in there is that it mirrors almost everything that you hear almost anywhere you go in the country at the moment, which is just a profound despond, like a profound malaise, a sense of just complete hopelessness, really. The winter fuel thing, it is astonishing the extent to which that attached itself to the reputation of this government, like just an embodiment somehow of how little they care and about how off their attitudes are. But, Starmer's going to U-turn on that, and you could say, well, that's that barnacle off the boat. But it's bigger than that. You actually ask people what it is that they're so unhappy about, and they can't really tell you necessarily. It's a feeling, it's a vibe, it's an attitude about the relationship between Westminster and the rest of the country, and how Westminster treats the rest of the country, which goes back beyond this government, beyond the last government. And that is what Reform and Farage are tapping into. And that is what is different. And if you're a politician trying to address that, I don't really know what you do and how you do it, because I'm not sure just delivering stuff for people will be enough to address it, because I think people will still feel it anyway.
I think one of the things that comes out so strongly from that piece, Lewis, is the sense that people are always a massive contradiction. We're all a massive contradiction. Yeah. You can vote Brexit at one point, you can regret voting Brexit, you can still love Farage, and it comes back to something that is much more visceral than a sort of spreadsheet of politics and what people have done and what they haven't. It's almost, I wonder whether the simplest question isn't, does the candidate like me? As a voter, does that candidate come to Blackpool or come to my hometown and make me feel like they like me?
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I think this is the thing that those of us who follow politics day by day, hour by hour, it's the biggest mistake we always make. I do it all the time, right? You're constantly trying to, because it's kind of our job, we're constantly trying to impose order on the chaos. And the truth is the way that most people look at politics actually is very chaotic, or at least it doesn't
contradictory.
And it doesn't. And so that guy there who owns that pub, he's literally started Britain's first reform club. That's how much he likes Farage. That's how much he likes reform. And if people watch the video version of that, you'll see that social club is
very blue.
It's very blue. It's emblazoned
very turquoise
with the reform turquoise, right? So it could not be more. And yet, what's the first thing that he basically says to me? He's like, "Well, yeah. If I'd known how difficult Brexit was going to be, I'd have voted Remain." And when you say to him, "But then doesn't that then, test your faith in Farage?" Yeah. Well, no, not really. Not really, because it seems logical. I can change my mind, I can get it wrong, doesn't matter.
The first rule of politics is to remember how little most normal people actually care about politics.
Yeah, and we don't say that in a pejorative way. We're the weird ones, right? We're the unusual, and it's it's an encumbrance, really.
And I think the problem of being analysts of politics is you look at whether a policy is working or not. Have they had a good Prime Minister's questions or not? Have they had a good kind of interview on whichever programme it happens to be or not? And people who are voting in the country are much more impressionistic, and there is a general feeling of, I'm fed up with Labour, fed up with the Tories. Jesus, Nigel Farage can't do any worse than any of them. I'm ready to give him a go.
To turn the corner, we are on the eve now, the cusp of something that should barely be making political ripples in a normal world, but feels sort of out of size massive right now. And that is this Scottish parliamentary by-election in Hamilton, which now seems like a race between the SNP and Reform. And the Scots hate Farage. They hate Reform. They hated the Brexit Party. They hated the UKIP Party. Suddenly, something's changed. And I think he's first in the polls, isn't he?
Now Reform are polling second on Holyrood intention, which is, this Holyrood elections in 2026. And as you say, Emily, this is a real transformation. Historically, UKIP, Brexit Party, heavily Remain voting Scotland. Farage seen as like the embodiment of a particular type of, let's put it this way, a kind of bluff Englishness, sort of the sort of Englishness of the golf course and the sort
You're
of pub
trying not
door.
to say gammon, aren't you?
McGammon. But he, generally unpopular, and yet now second in the polls, and as you say, genuinely competitive. It feels like in this by-election where they shouldn't have touched, and it'll be a big moment on Thursday, Friday morning if they were to win it or even get close. I think part of it probably is simply around the trends you've already talked about, which are particularly intense in Scotland. The SNP have now been there since 2007. Labour, who looked like they were actually going to potentially have a chance of taking Holyrood back. If Holyrood had been last year, when the general election was, or roughly around then, Labour would probably have won it. But now, obviously, they're in Westminster, they're in government. The SNP can play the old card they love to play, which is just running against whoever's in Westminster. So Labour is delegitimised to some extent. Conservatives completely delegitimised like they are in the rest of the country. So where else is there? And Reform, as they are in other parts of the country, filling that none of the above, screw you, 2 fingers up to them box in Scotland as they are elsewhere.
I mean, it's terrifying for Labour. It must be, because, since the general election victory, you've seen kind of winter fuel payments and all the other things where in Scotland it has gone down so badly, where they feel that the government in Westminster is kind of making decisions which are incredibly unpopular, which has been an absolute gift for the SNP. And given, the conversations we were having about the SNP a year ago, 18 months ago, and, their death and demise and all the rest of it, it was somehow unconscionable, knowing Scottish politics a bit, that it would be Reform that would be surging.
Yeah,
in Scotland, because as you say, Lewis, you look at the EU referendum vote. Scotland votes decisively to remain. Farage is kind of seen as deeply unpopular, kind of absolutely embodiment of everything. He's like an advert for Scottish nationalism. You just look at Nigel Farage in his tweed jacket and his red corduroys, and you think, God Almighty, I hate all that.
And it goes back to illogicality, right, John? Or at least as we see it, because actually, if you look at the polls, the SNP have stabilised. They actually haven't resurrected very much. They've stabilised as Labour have gone down. Reform have gone up. Reform are even attracting some formerly SNP support, right? Which again seems antithetical and weird. But again, at one point, the SNP was the 2 fingers up party, right? They were the anti-system party. They were the ones, if you wanted to protest at Westminster you didn't like, then you would vote for. But now they're the establishment in Holyrood. They have been for a very long time. They used to do very well in Westminster until very recently. So if you are looking, if Scotland is not immune, like the rest of the country, or indeed the rest of Europe or the US, from that anti-system feeling. And it looks as if Reform are to some extent capitalising on it, but of course we have to wait for the by-election this week and what happens in the future.
It's got really dirty. It's got really dirty between the 2 leaders, between 2 of the leaders, Anna Sawa for Labour in Scotland and Farage. And Sawa has called Farage a pathetic little man. And I think Farage is now trying to capitalise on Sawa calling him, Farage, out as a racist and saying, the whole free speech trope, why aren't people allowed to do what they want, and why are you trying to tell me what people can and can't have? And in a way, this is the thing, you get sucked into the microcosm of what is happening tomorrow, this week and tomorrow, will probably play out, not just in next year's Scottish parliamentary elections, but this will be a blueprint, if Farage wins, as it was in Runcorn, for how you do this. He's practising, right? Well, he hasn't done this before, not with Reform.
And the other thing that just you can't overstate the importance of is that Farage has ambitions to be the next Prime Minister. You have to start making inroads in Scotland. And that is what he is doing, and that is what I think the other parties thought would not happen. I think they kind of took the view that somehow Scotland was sacred territory, and broadly speaking, it was still a battle between Labour and the SNP, and Reform were nothing to do with Scotland. And that is changing.
Yeah, I mean, whether it translates in Westminster is obviously, the advantage that Farage will have in Holyrood is that it's proportional, or at least it's quasi-proportional, so that will help him. Of course, if prospects are looking decent in Scotland, they're looking extremely robust in Wales, which will have the Senate elections at the same time. UKIP, actually, by comparison to Scotland, UKIP and Farage and Brexit Party always did pretty well in Wales, particularly in South Wales and the valleys and so on in those Labour seats.
I remember Mark Reckless.
Oh yeah,
I mean, one of the 2
turning up in
UKIP,
Wales. having been a Kent MP.
MPs,
Natural dovetailing, and Neil Hamilton, of course.
Neil Hamilton,
yes, quite a rogues gallery.
What a cast of characters.
Yeah.
We're back in a moment. with Elon's escapades.
How mad do you think President Trump is going to be when he finds out that Elon Musk said, "I'm sorry, but I just can't stand it anymore. This massive, outrageous, pork-filled congressional spending bill is a disgusting abomination. Shame on those who voted for it. You know you did wrong. You know it."
Look, the president already knows where Elon Musk stood on this bill. It doesn't change the president's opinion. This is one big, beautiful bill, and he's sticking to it. Tamara.
You've got to give it to Caroline Levitt. She doesn't miss a beat, does she? She just goes straight on. It's all fine. Elon Musk.
Mum and Dad are divorcing, but don't worry about it, kids. You'll be fine.
Well, we're going to spend an awful lot more time talking about this on the Newsagents USA because it is absolutely fascinating what is unfolding in Donald Trump's and Elon Musk's separation. Divorce, getting more acrimonious, it seems, by the day. Started off like it was a friendly separation, but now Elon Musk is really going for it.
Yeah, that was Elon Musk talking about Donald Trump's big, beautiful bill. That was the actual title. And Elon Musk's calling it a disgusting abomination. So there you go. Two sides of the same coin. We'll be discussing that, and we'll be talking about America's super rich by the author of Haves and Have-Yots.
That's all on Newsagents USA, and we will be back here tomorrow with the Newsagents. See you then. Bye-bye.
Bye for now.
The Newsagents. This is a Global Player original podcast.